Notice what happens when you try to stay honest with someone who has already decided to play unfairly. You explain calmly at first, then you explain again. Then suddenly you are defending your tone, your memory, your intentions, and your character. Somehow the conversation is no longer about what they did. It is about how you reacted after they pushed you too far. That is the trap. Some people do not need to defeat you with truth. They only need to pull enough emotion out of you to make you look uncontrolled. And if you have ever gone home tired, replaying every word, regretting the message you sent, wondering why your honesty made you look weak, this video is for you. Because the answer is not to become dirty like them. The answer is to become calm enough to see the game before you move. You can feel it the second the conversation changes. At first you think you are being misunderstood, so you explain yourself again, you slow your voice down. You choose your words carefully. You try to be fair, even while something inside you starts tightening. But then you notice it. They are not listening to understand you. They are listening for the next place to cut. They are waiting for the moment your voice shakes, the moment your face changes, the moment your frustration makes you look like the person they have been trying to describe. That is the part that hurts, not just what they said, not just what they did, but the way they made your honesty feel useless. You came with truth, and they came with truth, and they came with tactics. You came trying to repair something, and they came trying to win. You thought the conversation was about clearing the air, but they were building a scene where your pain could be used as evidence against you. And because you cared, you reacted. You sent the long message. You explained the same thing 5 different ways. You replayed every word after coming home, tired, sitting on the edge of your bed, phone still in your hand, chest heavy with that ugly mix of anger and regret. You asked yourself how someone could twist something so simple. You wondered why being calm came too late, why your body betrayed you, why your emotions gave them exactly what they wanted. But listen carefully, that reaction was not proof that you are weak. It was proof that you were still expecting fairness from someone who had already stopped playing fair. That is the uncomfortable truth. Some people do not need to be right. They only need you to look unstable. They do not need to prove their innocence. They only need to pull you into enough noise that no one can tell where the damage started. They press where it hurts, then act surprised when you bleed. They provoke you privately, then judge you publicly for responding. They speak calmly after they have spent hours disturbing your peace, because they understand something you did not want to believe. Whoever controls the appearance of control often controls the story. This is where you must change, not by becoming dirty, not by learning to lie better, not by learning to lie better, not by turning your heart into something hard and empty. You change by realizing that calmness is not always a personality trait. Sometimes it is a decision made in the middle of pressure. Sometimes it is your hand pulling back from a phone before you type the sentence that will be screenshotted. Sometimes it is your mouth closing before you explain your soul to someone who only wants material to rearrange. Sometimes it is letting the silence sit there, uncomfortable and heavy, because you finally understand that not every accusation deserves a performance. The first advantage belongs to the person who sees the game before reacting to it. That is the lesson hidden inside the pain. When someone plays dirty, their real weapon is not always the lie, the gossip, the betrayal, or the insult. Their weapon is your urgency, your need to correct it now, your fear that people will believe the wrong version, your panic that silence will make you look guilty. So they rush you, they bait you, they create smoke, and then blame you for coughing. But once you see it, something inside you becomes quieter. You stop treating every attack like an emergency. You stop handing over your emotional temperature to people who have not earned access to your inner world. You begin to understand that loud defense can sometimes make the trap look believable. You do not need to scream your innocence in every room where your name was mishandled. You need to become steady enough that your life, your patterns, your discipline, and your distance begin to speak in ways panic never could. This does not mean you let people walk over you. It means you stop stepping into the mud just because someone invited you there. You can set a boundary without shaking. You can leave a conversation without proving every detail. You can document what matters, protect your peace, and move differently without announcing the shift. Because the moment you stop playing loud, you become harder to move. And for someone who is counting on your reaction, your calm becomes the first sign that they are no longer in control of you. The dangerous part is not always what they did to you. Sometimes the dangerous part is how much of your pain you showed them afterward. You thought if they could see how deeply it hurt, they would finally understand. You thought if you explained the sleepless nights, the anxiety in your chest, the way your routine broke after what happened, something human in them would soften. So you opened the wound wider. You gave them the full story. You told them what it cost you. You showed them the place inside you that was still shaking. And for the right person, that would have mattered. But not everyone deserves to stand that close to your pain. That is a hard thing to accept, because you were not trying to be dramatic. You were trying to be understood. You were not trying to beg. You were trying to be honest. You were not trying to hand them power. You were trying to show them the damage. They kept denying, but some people do not look at your pain with care. They look at it like information. They listen closely, not because they want to heal what they broke, but because they want to learn where to press next time. And that realization can make you feel sick. You remember the conversation differently once you understand it. The way they stayed quiet when you were pouring yourself out. The way they asked certain questions, not to comfort you, but to measure how affected you still were. The way they acted calm while you were unraveling. The way you walked away feeling exposed, like you had just given someone a private map of every place you were still tender. That is where your honesty started working against you. Not because honesty is wrong, not because feeling deeply is wrong, but because honesty without discernment becomes unsafe around people who have already shown you they do not handle truth with respect. You cannot keep giving sacred parts of yourself to people who treat emotions like tools, weakness like opportunity, and vulnerability like proof that they still have access to you. You have to learn the difference between being open and being readable. When someone plays dirty, they study reactions. They notice what makes you over-explain. They notice when your voice changes. They notice which accusation makes you panic, which silence makes you chase, which delay makes you check your phone again and again. They learn your rhythm. Then they interrupt it on purpose. They know exactly when to pull away, when to return with half an apology, when to return with half an apology, when to act confused, when to make you feel like the unstable one for needing clarity. And if you are not careful, you start living around their movements. Your day gets shaped by their mood. Your peace depends on whether they reply. Your confidence rises or falls depending on whether they approve of the explanation you gave them. You become tired in a way sleep does not fix, because your mind is constantly trying to solve someone who benefits from staying unclear. That is not love. That is not loyalty. That is not patience. That is emotional access being misused. So the shift begins quietly. You stop reporting every feeling. You stop sending paragraphs to people who keep pretending not to understand simple things. You stop telling unsafe people exactly where they hurt you. Not because you are cold, because you are finally careful. Careful is not bitter. Careful is what happens when your peace becomes more important than being seen by the wrong person. Careful is when you feel the urge to explain, but you pause long enough to ask yourself, will this protect me or will this expose me? Careful is when you do not let someone's distance drag you into panic. Careful is when your pain remains real, but it is no longer available for careless hands. You can still be kind. You can still be honest. You can still love deeply. But now there is a door where there used to be an open field. People do not get unlimited access just because they know how to knock the wound. Does not need an audience to be real. It needs protection. It needs time. It needs silence that does not explain itself to people who already know what they did. And the day you stop showing them where it hurts is the day they lose the easiest way to control you. The hardest people to understand are not always the loud ones. Sometimes the most dangerous confusion comes from someone who smiles while they drain you. You keep trying to answer the face in front of you. The soft voice, the calm expression, the little apology that sounds almost believable. The message that arrives after days of silence, written just carefully enough to make you question your own memory. And because part of you still wants peace, you almost accept the surface. You almost let the mask convince you that maybe you misunderstood everything. But your body remembers what their words keep hiding. You remember how heavy you felt after talking to them. You remember how a simple conversation somehow turned into you defending your intentions, your tone, your loyalty, your memory. You remember leaving with more questions than answers. And later, when the room got quiet, you replayed the whole thing in your mind, trying to find the exact moment where the truth slipped away. That is where you have to slow down. Not because you are paranoid, not because you want to see evil in everyone, but because some people do not show themselves through one dramatic betrayal. They show themselves through patterns that repeat quietly. They apologize, then repeat. They deny, then shift blame. They act wounded when you mention the wound they gave you. They speak about honesty while hiding the parts that would expose them. And if you only listen to the performance, you will keep missing the pattern. This is where your pain starts becoming intelligence. You stop asking, why would they say that, and begin asking, what does this behavior keep protecting? You stop being hypnotized by the tone of their voice and start noticing the direction of their actions. You stop giving full trust to people who only become gentle when they feel you pulling away. That shift is quiet, but it changes everything. Because the mask needs your speed. It needs you to react before you observe. It needs you to respond to the message before you remember the history. It needs you to feel guilty before you notice how often guilt is used to move you. A dirty player does not always need to attack you directly. Sometimes they only need to keep you emotionally busy. Busy explaining, busy hoping, busy trying to decode why they are suddenly warm after being cold, kind after being cruel, present after disappearing. And while you are busy decoding them, you abandon yourself. That is the part nobody sees. They see your confusion, but not the manipulation that created it. They see your long message, but not the silence that pushed you there. They see your emotional response, but not the weeks of small disrespect that made your nervous system tired. So you begin to look like the problem, because you are the one finally showing the damage. But the moment you start studying the mask, you stop volunteering for that role. You pause. You listen differently. You let people finish their performance without rushing to correct every line. You notice who becomes kind only when they need access again. You notice who turns every boundary into an accusation. You notice who can describe their pain clearly, but becomes confused the second you describe yours. You notice who benefits when the room stays unclear. And slowly, the spell breaks. Not all at once, maybe one night you were sitting alone, phone in your hand, reading a message that would have pulled you back before. But this time, something in you does not move. You can see the shape of it now. The charm, the sadness, the careful wording, the little hook hidden inside the apology. And instead of answering from the wounded place, you answer from the part of you that has finally started watching. That is not coldness. That is self-respect learning how to breathe. You do not need to expose every mask the moment you see it. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let someone reveal themselves without helping them edit the scene. Let their contradictions pile up. Let their patterns speak. Let your silence collect information your emotions used to interrupt. Because when you stop answering the face and start studying the mask, you are no longer trapped inside their performance. You are standing outside it, calm enough to see the truth. And once you see the truth without begging it to be different, they lose the power to keep you confused. They do not always defeat you with strength. Sometimes they defeat you by choosing the place where you are easiest to misunderstand. They wait until you are tired. They wait till other people are watching. They wait till your patience has already been worn thin by 100 small cuts no one else saw. Then they say the one thing they know will pull something raw out of you. And when you finally react, when your voice rises, when your words come out too fast, when your face shows the pain you were trying to hide, they step back like they had nothing to do with it. Now you look like the storm. That is the trap. You thought you were defending yourself, but you were standing exactly where they wanted you to stand. In their timing, in their atmosphere, under their rules. They created the pressure, then judged you for breaking under it. They pushed you into a corner, then acted confused when you came out swinging. And the worst part is how lonely it feels afterward, because everyone sees the reaction, but almost no one sees the setup. You go home carrying the whole thing in your chest. You replay it while the room is quiet. You think about what you should have said, how you should have said, how you should have said it, where you lost control, why you gave them that version of you. You feel embarrassed, not because your pain was fake, but because now they have a scene, a moment, a screenshot, a tone, something they can point to and say, "See, this is what I mean." And that is when you realize the fight was never only about truth. It was about location, timing, appearance, control. Some people do not want a fair conversation. They want a stage. They want witnesses before context. They want urgency before clarity. They want you emotional enough to make mistakes and honest enough to explain those mistakes in public. They know that if they can drag you into their chosen battlefield, they do not need to be right. They only need you to look uncontrolled. So you have to stop accepting every invitation to chaos. Not every message needs an instant reply. Not every accusation deserves your energy at midnight. Not every disrespect has to become a public performance. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is step away before your nervous system starts speaking for you. Sometimes discipline looks like closing the chat, putting the phone down, and letting your silence protect what your anger would have exposed. This is not avoidance. This is not avoidance. This is positioning. There is a difference between running from conflict and refusing to fight inside a trap. You can address something later. You can speak when your mind is clear. You can choose privacy over spectacle. You can choose privacy over spectacle. You can say less while still standing firm. You can refuse the version of the conversation where you are rushed, cornered, mocked, interrupted, or forced to defend your character to someone who already decided to twist it. That moment changes you, because you begin to notice how often people try to pull you out of yourself. They raise the temperature and expect you to burn. They throw confusion into the room and wait for you to chase it. They use silence, sarcasm, guilt, or public pressure to make you move before you think. And for a long time, you did move. You reacted because you cared. You explained because you feared being misunderstood. You fought because you thought silence meant defeat. But now you understand something deeper. Silence is not defeat when it is chosen. Distance is not weakness when it is deliberate. Calmness is not surrender when it keeps you from becoming a character in someone else's story. You do not have to prove your strength by bleeding in front of people who came to watch you fall apart. You do not have to meet cruelty with noise. You do not have to answer from the place they wounded just because they touched it again. You can pause, you can breathe, you can leave the room, end the call, delay the response, and return to yourself before you decide what deserves your words. And when you stop fighting where they want you to fight, something quiet returns to you. Your dignity, the kind that does not need witnesses, the kind that does not panic when someone tries to misread it, the kind that understands that some battles are designed to make you lose yourself even if you win the argument. So let them choose the battlefield. You choose your ground, because the person who cannot drag you into chaos cannot control the shape of your response. Cannot control the shape of your response. The moment you start protecting yourself, some people will call it distance. They will notice you are not explaining as much. They will feel that your voice has less panic in it. They will sense that the door they used to walk through without knocking is no longer wide open. And because they were comfortable with your availability, your new quiet will feel like an offense to them. That is where you have to stay steady, because you know the truth. You're not becoming cruel. You're not trying to punish anyone. You are not trying to punish anyone. You are not playing some cold game to make people chase you. You are simply tired of being so readable to people who never handled you with care. Tired of having every emotion on display. Tired of announcing every plan, every wound, every fear, every reason, only to watch the wrong people use pieces of you in ways you never intended. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from being too open in unsafe rooms. You know what it feels like. Saying too much, then regretting it later. Sending the message, then feeling exposed the second it is delivered. Telling someone what you were trying to build, only to feel their doubts sitting in your chest afterward. Letting people know what hurt you, then watching them touch that exact place during the next argument. At some point, you realize the problem is not that you feel too much. The problem is that you have been giving live access to people who should have only received silence. And that realization changes the way you move. You still care, but you stop performing your care. You still feel deeply, but you stop making every feeling public. You still have dreams, plans, private fears, and quiet hopes. But now you understand that not everything growing inside you needs an audience. Some things need darkness first. Some decisions need time away from opinions. Some healing has to happen without explaining the wound to people who only came to inspect it. This is not becoming hard to reach. It is becoming hard to read. There is a difference. Hard to reach means you shut your heart down and disappear from everyone. Hard to read means you stop handing your entire inner world to people who have not earned that closeness. You can still answer with kindness. You can still be present. You can still love people, help people, speak honestly, and show up when it matters. But now there is a boundary between your surface and your center. Not everyone gets the center. That is maturity, that is discipline. That is the quiet self-respect of someone who has learned from being mishandled. You begin to keep certain things private, not because you are ashamed, but because you are protecting their growth. You do not tell everyone what you are working on. You let the routine become real before it becomes visible. You wake up, handle your responsibility, save a little money, fix one broken habit, train your body when no one is clapping, and keep your head down long enough for your life to start changing without a public announcement. And slowly, you feel it. A calm space returning inside you. Less pressure to be understood by everybody. Less hunger to prove that you are good. Less desire to explain why you pulled back. You stop giving people a daily report of your emotional weather. You stop letting their curiosity disguise itself as concern. You stop confusing access with love. This is where people may misunderstand you. Let them. Some will say you changed because they missed the version of you that was easy to predict. They missed knowing exactly what would make you react, what would make you answer, what would make you answer, what would make you apologize, just to restore peace. But the new you does not move on command anymore. The new you takes a breath before speaking. The new you lets a message sit. The new you lets a message sit. The new you no longer bleeds just to prove the wound is real. And yet your heart is still there. It is just guarded by wisdom now. You are not closed. You are selective. You are not empty. You are contained. You are not unreachable. You are simply no longer available to every hand that reaches for your peace. That is the shift they feel but cannot name. You have not become less human. You have become less accessible to people who only knew how to use your openness against you. The hardest thing is not staying silent when you do not care. The hardest thing is staying silent when every part of you wants to prove what really happened. You can feel the argument still alive inside your chest. It follows you into the quiet parts of the day. You are washing your face, but your mind is writing a response. You are trying to sleep, but your mind is writing a response. You are trying to sleep, but one sentence keeps repeating because you know it would expose them perfectly. You check your phone, not because you want more pain, but because part of you is waiting for the moment to defend yourself, to correct the lie, to finally make someone understand that you were not the problem they made you look like. And that is where anger becomes dangerous, not because your anger is wrong. Sometimes it is the only honest thing in the room. It tells you something was unfair. It tells you a boundary was crossed. It tells you that you tolerated too much, explained too much, stayed too long, trusted too quickly. But anger also has a way of rushing your hand toward the door of a trap. It makes you want to speak before the full picture is formed. It makes you want to reveal what you know before they have revealed who they are. That is the part you have to see. Dirty players often survive by forcing you to move too early. They want you to panic. They want the long message, the public reaction, the emotional proof that you were wounded. They want you to spend all your energy clearing your name while they sit back and act calm. They know that if they can make you chase the truth loudly enough, people may stop looking at what caused the chase. So time becomes your discipline, not passive time, not weak time, not sitting there pretending it did not hurt. A different kind of time, the kind where you hold your response until it is no longer shaking. The kind where you stop feeding the fire just because someone keeps throwing sparks at you. The kind where you document what matters, remember what was said, watch what repeats, and let the pattern become louder than your explanation ever could. Because some truths do not need to be shouted immediately. Some truths need room to reveal themselves. You have seen this before. Someone lies once, then has to lie again to protect the first lie. Someone plays innocent, then becomes careless when they think no one is noticing. Someone acts calm in public, then repeats the same behavior in private until the mask starts slipping. If you rush too quickly, you interrupt the exposure. You step into the scene and become the distraction. But if you can stay steady long enough, their own pattern begins to speak. And that is uncomfortable because patience feels like losing at first. It feels like they are getting away with it. It feels like silence is making you smaller. It feels like people are believing the wrong version. At night, your pride will ask you why you are not fighting harder. Your pain will ask you why you are letting them walk around untouched. Your fear will tell you that if you do not speak now, the story will close without your side being heard. But then something deeper in you answers. You do not need to destroy your peace trying to speed up what time is already revealing. You do not need to become frantic just because someone else is dishonest. You do not need to place your dignity in the hands of every person who heard a twisted version of you. The people who truly know your character will not need a performance, and the people who are eager to misunderstand you were never safe judges of your life anyway. So you begin to move differently. You stop writing from the wound. You stop replying from the fire. You let your body calm before your words leave your mouth. You choose the response that protects your future, not the one that satisfies your anger for 5 minutes. You return to your routine slowly. You clean your space. You finish the work. You keep your plans private. You let your silence become organized instead of wounded. And one day, without needing to force it, you notice the truth, breathing on its own. Their story changes. Their behavior repeats. Their calm starts looking rehearsed. Their innocence begins to sound too polished. And you are no longer standing there exhausted, begging people to see it. You are simply watching what you were patient enough not to interrupt. That is when you understand why calm timing matters. Anger could have given them a scene. Time gave you the evidence. There comes a point where you get tired of watching your energy revolve around someone else's behavior. You wake up and their name is already in your mind. You try to work, but a part of you is still arguing with what they said. You sit in silence, but it does not feel peaceful yet because inside you there is still noise. The replay, the unfairness, the things you wish people understood, the anger that returns when you remember how easily they disturbed your whole day while continuing with theirs, like nothing happened. And that is the moment you have to be honest with yourself. They may have done you wrong, but if your entire life becomes a reaction to them, they are still holding the center. Even your healing can become another way of orbiting the same person if all you do is think about how to look unaffected. You can become obsessed with appearing calm while still being controlled inside. You can stay silent on the outside and still be screaming in every room of your mind. That is not freedom yet. Freedom begins when your attention returns to your own life. Not in a dramatic way, not with a public announcement, not with a sudden personality change that everyone has to notice. It begins quietly, almost embarrassingly small. You clean the space you have been neglecting. You answer the responsibility you have been avoiding. You eat properly. After days of surviving on stress, you go for the walk you kept postponing. You save the money you were about to waste, just to feel better for 1 hour. You do one thing that proves your future still matters more than their chaos. That is where real leverage begins. Not over them, over yourself. Because the person who cannot control their sleep, their spending, their time, their mouth, their habits, their phone, and their emotional reactions will always be easy to move. Someone only has to say the right thing, disappear at the right time, disrespect them, in the right tone, and suddenly their whole inner world collapses. You know that version of yourself. You have lived inside that instability. You have felt how exhausting it is to be pulled away from your own priorities by someone who does not even deserve that much influence. So now discipline becomes protection. You stop treating routine like something boring. You start seeing it as a place to return when people try to scatter you. Your morning becomes a boundary. Your work becomes a boundary. Your silence becomes a boundary. The way you train your body, manage your money, protect your sleep, and keep your promises to yourself becomes a quiet wall around your peace. And at first, nobody claps for it. Nobody sees you fighting the urge to check your phone. Nobody sees you choosing not to reply from anger. Nobody sees you sitting with discomfort instead of running toward distraction. Nobody sees the small private victories that feel almost invisible from the outside. But you see them. You know what it costs to stay with yourself for one more day. That is enough. Because something begins to change when you keep your life moving without needing witnesses. You become less available to chaos, not because you are pretending to be above pain, but because you are building a life that cannot be paused every time someone behaves badly. You start trusting yourself again. You stop waiting for an apology to begin your next chapter. You stop needing the other person to become honest before you become disciplined. That is a deep shift. You realize the best response is not always a message, a confrontation, or a perfectly worded explanation. Sometimes the response is a paid bill, a completed task, a body that is getting stronger, a mind that is reading again, a room that is finally clean, a plan that is no longer being shared with people who secretly hope you fail, a version of you that is slowly becoming harder to distract. This is how you take your power back without becoming cruel. You do not chase revenge. You remove the access. You do not beg people to see your value. You build so quietly that your value stops needing their permission. You do not waste your life trying to defeat someone at their own game. You become too focused to keep playing. And one day, you notice it. The same behavior that used to break your whole day now barely moves you. Not because you forgot. Not because it never hurt, but because your life has weight again. Your discipline gave you somewhere stronger to stand. That is quiet leverage. The moment your future becomes louder than their disturbance, they are no longer the most powerful thing in the room. The final test is not whether you can hurt them back. The final test is whether they can still make you abandon yourself. Because after everything, there is usually one last pull. One more message that sounds almost innocent. One more accusation dressed like concern. One more moment where they act as if nothing happened, as if your silence was the problem, as if your distance came from nowhere, and something in you still wants to answer with the full story. You want to open the file of every wound, every contradiction, every night you spent trying to understand why someone could disturb your peace, and then call you difficult for reacting. But this time, you do not rush. You feel the heat rise in your chest, and you let it pass through without handing it the steering wheel. You notice the old version of you reaching for the phone, preparing the paragraph, building the defense, searching for the perfect sentence that will finally make them see. And then you realize something that changes the entire room inside you. They do not need more information. They know enough. Some people pretend not to understand because confusion keeps the door open. They keep asking for explanations because explanations give them access. They keep reopening the same wound because your reaction tells them they can still reach you there. And if you keep giving them your voice every time they touch the bruise, they never have to respect the boundary. They only have to keep testing it. So now your calm becomes different. It is not the shaky calm that is secretly begging to be noticed. It is not the silence that hopes they will panic and come back softer. It is not the quiet performance where you are still checking whether they are watching. This calm belongs to you. It has no audience. It does not need to be understood by the person who benefited from misunderstanding you. You know when to speak now. You know when to leave. You know when to leave. You know when to write things down instead of arguing from memory. You know when to stop giving private access to public-minded people. You know when a conversation is asking for honesty and when it is asking for another piece of you to misuse. That is not coldness. That is judgment returning. For a long time, you thought being fair meant staying open, even when someone kept proving they were unsafe. You thought being mature meant explaining calmly to people who had already shown you they preferred your confusion. You thought peace meant fixing the tension, even when the tension was created to control you. But now you understand that peace is not always found by repairing the room. Sometimes peace begins when you finally walk out of it without needing everyone inside to agree with your reason. And yes, they may call it arrogance. They may call it distance. They may say you changed. They may tell the story in a way that makes your silence look cruel and their behavior look harmless. Let them speak from the version of you they no longer have access to. Let them describe a door they can no longer open. You do not have to mirror their ugliness to prove you saw it. You do not have to become sharp in the same place they became careless. You do not have to punish, chase, expose, or beg for the room to understand you. You can protect yourself with clean hands. You can move with discipline. You can let your life become quieter, more ordered, more selective. You can return to your work, your body, your money, your sleep, your private rebuilding. You can become someone who does not need drama to feel alive. That is the part they cannot control. They can misunderstand your silence, but they cannot force you to explain it. They can provoke your memory, but they cannot force you to explain it. They can provoke your memory, but they cannot command your reaction. They can test the old wound, but they cannot make you bleed in public anymore. They can play dirty, but they cannot decide what kind of person you become in response. And that is where the game ends. Not because they apologized, not because everyone finally saw the truth, not because the past suddenly stopped hurting. It ends because you stop letting their behavior write your character. The calmest person in the room is not the one who feels nothing. It is the one who feels everything, understands the trap and still chooses not to move. If this message reached a part of you that has been tired of explaining, tired of reacting, and tired of being pulled into other people's chaos, then do not ignore that feeling. It means something in you is ready to move differently, not louder, not colder, wiser, calmer, more selective with your energy. Before you leave, like this video, if it helped you see your own situation more clearly, comment "I choose calm" if you are done letting unfair people control your reactions, and subscribe if you want more deep self-mastery videos about silence, discipline, emotional control, and rebuilding yourself in private. This channel is not for people chasing noise. It is for those learning how to return to themselves quietly with dignity, focus, and self-respect. Stay close, because the next video will take you even deeper into that transformation.